So if I have time, I'll try to call out people before each of the sessions. So before we turn to panel one, we'd like to welcome several of our conference leadership benefactors: Arrow Augero and Ari Giovenco with Amazon, John Miller and Jade Tate with Trade Data Monitor, Dante Smalls and Amgad Shehata with UPS, Maria Ziba and Cole Spain with the National Pork Producers Council. Thank you, Ari and Arrow, John and Jade, Dante, Amgad, Maria, and Cole for your support for WITA and the 2024 conference. We are grateful to all of you. And thanks to everyone, of course, who is joining us today. If you registered to attend the conference, you should have received a link to our conference program by email this morning, which contains biographies for each of our speakers so we can dispense with lengthy introductions. I'd now like to welcome on screen our kickoff panel featuring two dear friends. Angela Ellard, the Deputy Director General of the World Trade Organization, who was recognized in 2023 with WITA's Lifetime Achievement Award, and our moderator, Ambassador Peter Allgeier, President of Nauset Global, a former Deputy United States Trade Representative, and the recipient of WITA's 2004 Distinguished Service Award. Peter and Angela are longtime friends of WITA and many in our audience today, and we're delighted to host you both today. Peter?
Okay, well, thank you very much, Ken. And Angela, thank you very much for carving this time out of your hectic schedule. I know that with only 2 weeks before the ministerial, the Secretariat is very involved in trying to pull all of these issues together. Now, fortunately, this is a leap year, so you get an extra day to do this. I'm sure that's a relief to you. But seriously, the Secretariat plays such an important role in kind of herding together all these more than 160 countries to come to a successful conclusion at the ministerial. So congratulations on the work you're doing, and thanks for carving out this time. The Secretariat does have a daunting role to play, and I must say that my time there demonstrated to me how professional and impartial the Secretariat is, and they're so crucial to the success of these negotiations. So let's get started. Perhaps we could start with the big picture, and if you could take a few minutes to kind of let us know what you see as the principal issues that will be the focus of this ministerial.
Well, thank you very much, Peter. It's such a delight to be here doing this panel with you today. And hi to Ken and all my dear WITA friends. I have my WITA mug. And thank you for recognizing the work of the Secretariat. This is an extremely hardworking and dedicated group of professionals that I have the privilege to work with. They work incredibly hard without stopping. So especially in the lead up now to MC13 in less than 2 weeks, actually, at this point. We are the WTO here in Geneva. It is humming with life. It's the evening, but yet we have, in fact, I just stepped out of a negotiating session on fish that I'll head back to. We have several hundred people in the room going through enormous details on the fisheries subsidies agreement. The coffee is flowing, and weekends around here are just another day. So we really want to see some results here. And I think it's very important for the multilateral trading system and for the WTO that we see good results at MC13. I would say that the atmosphere here in the lead up to MC13 is actually more positive. It's better than it was in the lead up to our last ministerial conference. And you know, the last one was successful. So we do note a certain positive tone by members, a constructive tone, I would say. I think they're seeing more transparency. I think there are more conversations that are going on. But of course, the issues are enormously difficult. So I don't want to overstate the positivity of the tone, but you need to have a good tone, I think. I think we also have to be mindful of the context that MC13 is operating under. Of course, we have conflicts in Ukraine and in the Middle East. We have elections in countries that altogether is about 50% of the world population, shipping disruptions in major waterways, all kinds of things that contribute to a very tense atmosphere, not to mention food security and a climate crisis as well. In terms of MC13, what we're looking at in order to see what a successful MC13 would be, we have to aim to achieve or make progress in achieving a wide variety of objectives. So first, I would say, is the entry into force of the first fisheries subsidy agreement, which was concluded at MC12. This prohibits the most harmful forms of subsidies that are granted to increase capacity and to allow fishing in illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. So this agreement needs 110 of our members, 110 to come into effect. That's 2/3 of our total membership. We are more than halfway there. They're rolling in every day, and we're hoping to make a big splash at MC13. In addition, we have the second wave of negotiations. Those discussions are underway now to come together on tough disciplines for subsidies that contribute to overfishing and overcapacity. And here we have a lot of interest and ambition, but also managing how we manage special and differential treatment for developing members that's appropriate and effective. So trying to keep as much ambition as possible within that context. Dispute settlement reform is another area of key focus for members here in Geneva, where they would like to, as you recall, back in MC12, the ministers made a commitment with respect to the dispute settlement system to making sure that it is accessible and that it is fully functional. However, members define that by 2024. So work there is very much ongoing, and we can get into that a little bit later if you'd like in terms of the details. We also have the decision on the extension of the e-commerce moratorium on charging customs duties for electronic transmissions. That is something that expires at MC13, and there's a lot of interest there. And on all of these, I can get into much more detail, but I just wanted to set a stage. We also want to see what kind of progress can be made with respect to agriculture negotiations. And again, there we have members with very different views, but some common interests with respect to food security. Development-related issues, integration of plurilateral agreements into the WTO architecture, accessions. We have 2 new members who will be joining us, Comoros and Timor-Leste, which is very exciting, bringing our number up to 166. So this is a taste of some of the issues that our members are dealing with. And we're making progress, but there's a lot of work to be done in the next 10 days before we all get on planes.
Great. Okay, thanks very much, Angela. Obviously, there are several really important issues that the delegations are dealing with. Maybe we could start with the digital trade. And I think you mentioned the very important thing of renewing that moratorium on putting duties on e-commerce transmissions, which I think has been around since the late 90s. That still is a controversial issue, though, in some quarters. Is that not true?
Yes, it is. It is a controversial issue for some. It is I think many of our members view this maintaining the moratorium as maintaining the status quo. And they see that if the moratorium were not to be extended, and all of a sudden members would have the ability to charge customs duties on electronic transmissions, that it would really be a setback to digital trade and a setback to development for those developing members, of course, who depend on digital trade. It is interesting to see that many developing members do support the moratorium. At the same time, however, there are members who have a different view, who see the moratorium as contributing to the digital divide, that they want to be able to, for revenue purposes, to charge duties, and they see development as being hurt by maintaining this moratorium. So at the same time as all of these discussions on the moratorium, there's also a discussion relating to a work program to help developing members take advantage of digital trade and to address some of the issues relating to the digital divide. So it's quite an interesting debate. There's been a lot of analysis and study done by various international organizations, including, of course, the WTO, and a lot of important work to assess what would be the impact if that moratorium were to be removed, if it were to be ended. And the effect potentially could be quite devastating. So it's something that members are considering, but like I said, there are some with a very different view about this, and that needs to be taken into account.
One other question on the digital issues is, I know there is a group, I think it's called the Joint Statement Initiative. I mean, and they actually have made a lot of progress on some very practical issues. Any chance of that being accomplished at this meeting? Are people willing to, if where there's a large concentration of support for those things, harvesting those?
Yes, well, this JSI, the Joint Statement Initiative, is one of our plurilateral initiatives. So it's not a multilateral negotiation at this point, but any member who wants to join the negotiations is certainly welcome to do that. So 90 of our 164 members participate in this negotiation relating to e-commerce. And this involves many developing members and even some least developed members. And I think that's very important to note. So it's been quite intense. The co-conveners of this negotiation hope to conclude the negotiations in 2024. So not quite at the ministerial, but there is remarkable progress that's been made on many key issues right now. Issues like online consumer protection, electronic signatures, unsolicited electronic messages, and open government data. So these are, like you said, Peter, very, very practical issues that could benefit if this were to, when this does move forward. And in smaller groups, we have discussions on other topics, including data flows and localization, telecommunication services, cryptography utilizing products. So there's a roadmap that members have set for these negotiations, and 2024 is the target.
At the beginning, you said you're literally in the middle of a meeting on fisheries. And of course, that is really a precedent-setting agreement on environment and trade. And there's still work to be done, obviously. But I gather also you've been at the center of an effort to address the issue that many developing countries face, they really need assistance to have capacity building and technical assistance to implement these sorts of requirements, and that you're working with a number of other institutions on that. Could you just give us a couple of words on that and how that's going?
Sure. And yes, thanks for recognizing our fisheries agreement as being an environmental sustainability agreement. It's our first agreement with environmental sustainability at its core, and it meets one of the special development goals, the SDG goals set by the UN members, 14.6. So that's very important. And it was an agreement that was reached, of course, by consensus, which means that under our multilateral rule book, for an agreement to be adopted by ministers, it needs the consensus of all members. And just think how remarkable that is for all of these members to come together and say yes. So that's an important point. But like you said, many developing members need help to implement the obligations, both with respect to management of their fisheries, which is not really a WTO function, but there are elements of this in the agreement, as well as notification of their subsidies if they have subsidies. Developing members have said that they need help in order to be able to encourage sustainable fisheries in their countries. So as part of the agreement, we set up a fund, a trust fund. There's about $10 million in it now, which is remarkable. Oh, in just a year, we have raised that much. And this is designed to help developing members meet their obligations. It's what's so important about this fund is that it allows us to leverage the work and the funds of the World Bank and the Food and Agriculture Organization, so that we're coming at this with a variety of expertise and resources to help developing members. We spent most of a good chunk of last year traveling all over to visit various developing countries to tell them about why this agreement is so important for them, and to also demonstrate to them that that technical assistance will be there. We held several day-long sessions in 6 or 7 locations all over the world to help developing members. And I think that shows the commitment of the Secretariat to technical assistance and capacity building, as well as our donors. Many of our developed members have contributed funds that will be used for this purpose.
Great. You had mentioned, of course, dispute settlement, and that's an area where people are quite concerned. I mean, that's all traditionally was one of the key contributions of the WTO. What's the status of work on that?
Well,
And
it's
will that be
interesting the way you
something that will
frame.
be discussed at the ministerial, or is that in another area?
Well, it's interesting how you framed the question. You said that it was one of the key functions of the WTO, and it still is very much. There's work that needs to be done. For those in the audience who may not know, the dispute settlement mechanism within the WTO has several stages: a consultation phase, the panel phase to resolve disputes, and then if one panel appeals, it has access to our appellate body. The appellate body is not functioning right now. There is no quorum because of controversy over whether the appellate body has been performing the functions the way that it should. So now, over the course of the last year, there's been a very intensive informal process underway in which all members are invited to try to resolve issues relating to dispute settlement. These are issues that are quite broad in focus. Accessibility to dispute settlement by developing country members, that's one focus, as well as how to make the dispute settlement system more effective, more objective, and less time consuming, more efficient, but fundamentally the goal is to try to create a situation in which members can resolve their disputes. Dispute settlement is almost something of last recourse. The goal really is to try to assure compliance and to settle disputes. So as I mentioned, the ministers at MC12 said that their goal was 2024 for reforming the dispute settlement mechanism. And this is an incredibly important function. Like you said, Peter, it's one of our core functions. So what has happened without the appellate body being in place is that you can stop a case from moving forward by appealing into the void. There's no appellate body that's functioning. So we have 31 appeals that are pending. But these informal, technical, very intensive discussions that are going on is to work towards this goal of having a fully and well-functioning dispute settlement system by 2024. And these talks have been extremely productive. And there is a text that is that addresses many of these issues with significant progress. But there still are important, outstanding issues to be addressed, and we have to make sure that all member views are taken into account. So these discussions will continue. What we're hoping is that at MC13, ministers will be able to achieve a successful outcome in the immediate future and fulfill this commitment. But in any event, the work done to date, in our view, is remarkable and must not be lost. But I should say that in the meantime, dispute settlement continues. We have 11 ongoing disputes, 9 ongoing consultations. We have members who use the arbitration functions and the MPIA function as a means to find an alternative to appellate review. We also see situations in which having the panel report, even if it's not appealed, can help members reach successful outcomes. We saw that in disputes between Australia and China. We've seen that with respect to India and the US. So there definitely still is a very active dispute settlement system, but obviously there is reform that is needed.
Yeah. Oh, well, thanks for fleshing that out. So, I mean, in terms of the panels that are currently operating, they're operating in the same way as panels did in the past. So it's just that last step that is not there. It's an important step. But like you say, people at least now would be getting a sense of where panels are inclined to rule or to come out on substantive issues. They may not accept all of that, but at least it's giving people directions that is useful. And as you say, may foster an actual solution in certain cases. Yes,
I think so. It may help foster a solution, and that's the idea. I'm sorry, it's getting very dark in here. We're working. There we go. Okay, thank you. I guess I hadn't been moving around, and so the motion detector, the light was going off. But yes, I would say the question of the appellate body is because it's not functioning, but yet it's still on the books. There's no finality to decisions. Now, members have to decide whether they want some kind of appellate or second-tier review and what that would look like. So that is an issue they are still working on. But the challenge for us right now is to have something on the books that can't function, and that means that disputes then aren't necessarily final unless the parties choose for them to be.
Right. Okay. Let's see, what else? Oh, in terms, you hear a lot about WTO reform. Of course, there are very different views on what WTO reform should consist of. Could you give us a little bit of a picture of what's on the horizon there? What are the different interests that countries have in how they define WTO reform?
Yes. Well, reform is something that I think everyone agrees should happen. There is widespread agreement that the WTO needs reform among the members, among the ministers, certainly within the Secretariat. So that is a given that we need reform. But reform is in the eye of the beholder. And when we talk about the WTO needing reform and the WTO needing to make decisions, when I speak of the WTO, I mean the members, the countries, in essence, that are that make up the WTO. We in the Secretariat, we perform a function to support the members, to help them, but it is the members who really need to come together on this. And there's been a lot of creative discussion, very intensive back and forth among the members about what this could be. So we're talking about reform over all of our functions. The negotiating function, the monitoring of trade behavior, as well as dispute settlement, as we've already spoken about. The members have different priorities. Some of them want to look at the old rules and review them and see if they are still fit for purpose. Others want to add new substantive rules to the rule book. Others focus on procedures and transparency. Others focus on inclusiveness, particularly making sure that all delegations, whether large or small, have the opportunity to participate. And some, of course, want improvements all over these categories. So with respect to the substantive rule book, this is through negotiations. Some of our members are interested in trying to address this. I would give one example as the rules on subsidies, whether those should be examined, particularly as they relate to industrial subsidies. That looking at the interface between trade and state intervention in support of industrial sectors. Developing countries, when they look at this issue, their perspective it can be a bit different in prioritizing policy space for them to promote industrialization. So they look at subsidies or the potential for subsidies in a different way. And some of them see the actions that developed members take as perhaps carving them out of supply chains. So that's a very important issue. Then, with respect to the deliberative function, which relates to the way negotiations are conducted in the current framework that we have of committees and councils and other bodies, many members want to enhance transparency and improve compliance, for example, with the notification requirements when you take particular actions. Like trade remedies, for example, you're supposed to notify the WTO. So trying to improve that. And then there are other types of reform too, in the way in which we, the Secretariat, advise and assist our members, including using new digital tools. So it means a lot of different things. And we're trying to direct, to try to see what direction members want to take this in. And I think there'll be a very healthy discussion of this at MC13.
So you've listed a wide array of issues or concerns that members have. How are you conducting the work on WTO reform? Is it all in one group, or are there separate groups dealing with different aspects?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think members have different views about the ideal way And it depends on the issue, and it depends on the type of issue, whether it's substantive or procedural. So right now, in many of our committees, we have a committee on trading goods, a committee on intellectual property, trade remedies. We have a huge number of committees that function at a very high level. So we're trying to conduct reform with respect to how discussions are handled. So many of our developing members have asked for much more transparency and using digital tools and other tools to help them keep up to date. But in addition to this, we've had a series of retreats throughout the course of 2023, bringing together members to discuss particular issues that could be the subject of reform. So we've had deep discussions about industrial subsidies, about climate, about development. And those are some of the major areas where reform can be evidenced. Some would like to conduct more discussion on reform in the context of our committee on trade and development. Others want to use the General Counsel or some of our other bodies. And for many, it really depends on the issue as to where the appropriate forum is. But at the end of the day, it all needs to be pulled together so that we see these various threads. The last point that I would make is that reform doesn't have to be a monolithic challenge for us. It really we can do some things right away. We can do other things in the medium term and other things longer term. But we just have to have the mindset of figuring out what the issues are that are relevant for our members.
Right. Okay. No, that's really helpful to understand that. I mean, it's quite a task facing you, but it certainly is very, very important. You mentioned trips. That reminded me that at I guess the last ministerial, there was a decision about COVID-related things and a decision on therapeutics and diagnostics. Does that will that be extended? Are people talking about extending that?
Sure. Well, at MC12, there was a very intense discussion leading up to MC12, and at that ministerial, members embraced two tracks of work with respect to the pandemic. One is a declaration with respect to, a decision with respect to trade-related measures that members can take to ease supply chains of COVID products, for example, and other steps with respect to export restraints and reducing barriers to trade, facilitating trade in COVID-related products. So that was a very important work stream over the course of a couple of years. Mm-hmm. Then the second work stream related to TRIPS, the trade-related intellectual property agreement, in which the members agreed, again by consensus, to create more flexibility in the use of compulsory licensing with respect to TRIPS, with respect to the COVID vaccines. Mm-hmm. And now the question that members are talking about relates to therapeutics and diagnostics, whether the action that was taken at MC12 to improve flexibilities for compulsory licensing for vaccines should be extended to therapeutics and diagnostics. So this is a discussion that is still underway. It is controversial. Members have very different views about what the role of intellectual property is, what the role of trade, and how trade in these products can be facilitated. I think for everyone, the goal is to make sure that supply chains are such that developing members do have access to therapeutics and diagnostics or vaccines. It's interesting that the action that was taken in 2012, I'm sorry, in 2022, there has been no member has sought to use the new flexibilities. But therapeutics and diagnostics are a different kind of, with respect to intellectual property, they pose different issues with respect to channels of trade, of commerce. It's different. And those are the issues in particular that members are focusing on. How is it the same? How is it different?
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Earlier on, you mentioned agriculture, and of course, agriculture has always been an extremely important issue at the WTO. Certainly, what gets a lot of publicity is the discussion on stockholding and subsidies, I guess, primarily by developing countries. What is the status? That is something that will have to be addressed at this ministerial, correct?
The question of public stockholding and many of the issues that you describe relate to the question of food security and what can or cannot WTO members do with respect to trade and agriculture as it relates to food security. It's not the only issue out there with respect to trade in agriculture, but it is one in which there are very, very strongly held views, with some members saying that a commitment had been made to make this exception permanent, allowing public stockholding in this way to be permanent. Others have a very different view. Then you fold into the agriculture discussions the question of market access and the question of subsidies. Right. And there are different priorities that different members have. And so there's a healthy debate right now about whether agriculture negotiations should cover all of these issues, or whether they should focus on just a few issues, and whether and to what extent food security should be the focus. I think that there is a recognition of the importance of food security with respect to agriculture. But I think for MC13, the next 10 days or so before we leave for Abu Dhabi will be very intensive on this very subject. And then it will be something that the ministers will need to decide in terms of how much they want to take on. And how much, obviously, it's a huge portfolio. So the ministers, I don't think there's any expectation that the agriculture negotiations will be finished. But what is the path? What, if anything, can be agreed on now? And what is the path for the future?
Right. Okay. Okay, I don't know whether Ken wants to come in to ask a few questions.
If you got one to wrap up, Peter, that would be great. We just want to get to
yes, I do have one. And this is more of a personal question. Angela, clearly you were very familiar with the WTO from your work in the Congress, but being there is different. So anything that has either surprised you or, that you learned that you didn't realize, what's your impression of working over there now?
Well, I would say there are a lot of similarities to working on the Hill, in that, you're trying to support members, you're trying to help them make decisions, you're trying to give them information. One of the biggest differences is that on the Hill, of course, it's majority rules.
Yeah.
And that majority may change very quickly back and forth. But here in Geneva, things in terms of a multilateral agreement, it has to be done by consensus. So that means that collaboration, bridge building, compromise are certainly were important on the Hill, are important on the Hill, but in this context are even more of a challenge, because one member can say we're not doing this, and therefore prevents an agreement or a consensus from emerging on a particular topic. And I think another thing that has really impressed me is the importance of, and Peter, you nailed this, the issue of technical assistance and capacity building. That not all of our members are able to devote the same amount of time and resources as other members are. And there is a lot of generosity by our bigger members, but our role in the Secretariat is also to help developing members reach that, to be able to make the WTO serve them.
Right. Okay, well, thanks very much. It's been a pleasure talking with you. And I must say, the WTO is very fortunate to have you over there. So thanks for doing that service.
Well, thank you, Peter. I really appreciate that. And you know, you've contributed so much to the trade world over the years. Your deep expertise and your service has led to some real, tangible, meaningful results in improving lives. So congratulations to you.
Okay, thank you. Well, good luck over the next 2 weeks.
Thank you. We'll need it.
Thank you very much to both of you. Angela, before I let you go, I'm going to, if you have one more minute, I want to take one of the questions because it's a perfect transition for our next session, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Just about what the success of the fisheries negotiations might mean as a model for future objectives, achieving future objectives on sustainability and the environment.
Oh, yes. I love that question. I mean, I'm wearing my fish pin for the fish negotiations and my SDG goal pin as well. And this is I firmly believe that it was the sustainability element of the Fish One negotiations that made that come together. Members saw the imperative because fish stocks were plummeting, are plummeting, and the need to reverse that trend, not to prevent subsidies, not to prevent fishing, but to make sure that it's done in a sustainable manner. I think that it does speak volumes to the ability of consensus to be reached on issues of sustainability. And I hope that members will take this forward. For example, with respect to climate change, the WTO is a terrific forum for addressing the trade-related aspects. And you cannot solve the climate crisis or address the climate crisis unless trade is part of the solution.
Great. Thank you for helping us with our transition for our next session on climate-related issues. Angela, as always, we are incredibly grateful to you for everything you've done for the trade community, for trade policy for many, many, many years, and your friendship for myself and for WITA. Peter, as always, it's a true pleasure to have you on and to see you, even though we are virtual. So thank you both for joining us today.
Well, thank you.
Have a great evening in Geneva. Peter, I hope we see you soon. Before I introduce our next panel, I want